Hello everyone, so today's video is going to be about the fact that people will judge your magical path. If you don't belong to a particular religion, if you don't belong to a particular spiritual path, then more often than not, people will judge you for doing magic, for casting spells, for reading tarot, reading runes, doing blood magic, connecting with the earth, using shamanism to connect to different elements of earth and learn from them. People will judge you based on practices that they do not understand. Now, early on in Western civilization, well, maybe not early on, but earlier, much earlier than this in Western civilization, the Romans institutionalized religion in a way that the Greeks did not. So in Greek culture, it was more often a sacrifice of an animal or barley or some kind of, maybe even horses, or some kind of act or sacrifice to different spirits and gods, river nymphs, things like that, a spirit of a river, or the spirit of a land. But once we get to the Roman era, especially after the early Republic, once we start getting towards the 100 BC and forward, Roman religion kind of became solidified as an institution. This is how you do things, and there were priests that were assigned to carry out sacrifices, to basically talk to the masses, but mainly that this is how you sacrifice to the gods. That's not to say that Romans didn't respect other gods, but institutional religion started to form long before Christ and Peter's church and Christian identity started to form much later on. Hundreds of years post Christ AD. But this idea that you have institutions they started to lay down laws as far as who can be priests, which a lot of the time it was senators or nobility or people of note within Rome specifically who would become priests. And it really wasn't something you had to study for the majority of your life. It was just kind of an appointment. Like, this person has the right to conduct these sacrifices and to speak to the people about the gods. And that kind of edged other people's ideas of the gods and spirits out. Once this started happening, spirits and local sacrifices, local connection to the land, and everywhere where Rome had a strong hold of, whether it be, Gaul closer to Italy, or Germania closer to Italy, or, even if we go further east, there was this idea that it was not something you could do as an individual connecting to the gods, to the spirits, to nature, to the multiverse. It was something that had to be dictated by an official. Now, that later evolved into Christianity, where we had priests that they had to get a special commission from the church. They had to be you had to be a priest. You had to be somebody who was approved by the church, went through a certain amount of education, and then given personal dispensation to go into a certain area, or perhaps just to go on the road and preach the gospel to everybody that could hear. So the ironic thing is that the Christian missionary aspect to it, or the idea that you had to be affiliated with the church, a central authority, and you had to be approved by the church or a central authority, started before Christianity. And this is carried over even to nowadays. And now you might have a few spiritual leaders in the West here and there that aren't sanctioned by some major religion or some institutionalized religion, or at least piece of a religion. Like in Hinduism, there's a lot of different institutions. And it's much harder to define rules as far as who can be, not necessarily a Brahmin, but a sadhu, somebody who has renounced the world. or a Sikh. They have their own rules, and then also, of course, a Jain. They have their own rules. So there's a lot of institutions within Hinduism, but Hinduism, as far as thought goes, as far as even Vedanta goes, which is the idea that everything is one, it's harder to pin down, you have to be this, you have to follow these rules. But in the West, it's different. The vast majority of the time, you have to follow certain rules. You have to be a part, you have to have a direct connection to this or that church, this or that temple, this or that synagogue, this or that mosque, in order to have the authority to preach to the people. I'm being very vague here, but I'm trying to cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time. So, magic has always been something that allows somebody on an individual level to enact change in their life. That is a direct threat to most institutionalized religions or spiritual paths. The idea that somebody doesn't need a priest. That's the idea that somebody doesn't need a particular book that tells you how to do things. The idea that somebody just enacts magic to affect their lives on a spiritual level. That is very threatening to all institutions when it comes to spirituality and religion. But magic has always been with us, far before institutionalized religion in the West. Now in the East, much, much older, but in the West, almost just as old as far as records go. But it just took longer for institutions to be established, and we don't have records of the magic that your ancient Europeans started to practice around the time that Hindus started to really practice magic as far as records go, because we just don't have them. At any rate, as an individual, you have to take authority of enacting spiritual change in your life. This is why most of us that practice magic do it, is because we had this desire to affect change in relation to the supernatural, but real results here in the material. And also learn about where we're going to go when we die before we perhaps return here. In paganism in the West, its reincarnation is only known about by people who have really studied. But in the West, our ancient cultures definitely believed in reincarnation, rebirth. This idea that a soul doesn't just go somewhere and they're there forever. They come back here and the cycle continues until a point that most cultures have not really defined. But my idea of the point is that we kind of, we return here and then we do another circle of life, another circle of life, another circle of life. But if we fail in our challenges in our lives, then we go back down. But the idea is to go further and further up to where we become a trans-dimensional being and we go beyond this world and into a reality that we were always meant for until we reach oneness with the source, which is many layers up as far as dimensions go. At any rate, it's very important to not feel like you have to rely on either the mercy of God or the dictation from a I almost said mental institution, religious institution. Maybe they're similar, but it's very important that you know that you don't have to look up to an almighty God and beg for this or that. You can enact change magically in your life. That's not necessarily going against God. That's just the energy level that He put as a like a subdimension directly beneath us and kind of above us and kind of in this dimension that we can take advantage of. If God didn't want it, then it wouldn't be here, in other words. And it is here. We can take advantage of magic. People in society will judge you. People will think that it's weird. We're still going off of old stereotypes of the idea of a wicked witch or, a blood-sucking vampire. When I've known many psychic vampires who have no interest in hurting people, only recycling energy that either people willingly give or just leave behind in a space. We're still working past those barriers of thought that were set up by institutionalized religion. If you're a Wiccan and you believe in the rule of three, that's like enhanced karma. Everything you send out into the world, you'll receive 3 times back. So that's karma, which I believe in, is, you reap what you sow. Every action has an equal and relevant reaction, depending on when you need to get that, when that bad karma needs to come back to you if you did something bad, and when that good karma needs to come back to you if you did something good. But the rule of three is that if you send something out into the world, according to many witches, you'll receive it 3 times. So it's best not to try to curse people, not try to hurt people, and it actually is more moral than a lot of Christian thought. And a lot of the fear comes from a fear of hell. And when somebody looks at you doing magic and you're open about it, they're gonna yell at you what they fear. They're gonna say, well, some, not all, but some will say, you're gonna go to hell for what you do, and God will judge you forever, and you'll burn for an eternity. What you gotta realize is that they're not yelling that at you per se. They're repeating what they've been told, but they've been yelling that at themselves for years. And that fear has built and built and built to where they feel like they have to solidify it even externally and say, you're going to hell, you're going to hell, you're going to hell, when it's not the case. I can tell you that no matter what religion you follow, or spiritual path, or even if you don't follow any of them and you just practice magic, that will not send you to hell if you are a good person, if you're kind to other people. If you do good things for yourself, of course, that's fine. But if you just have an ideology of, if somebody attacks me, I'll attack them, or, I'm going to help the people around me through my magical practice, you're not going to go to hell. Also, hell's not eternal. Also, you have to do a lot of bad things to go to hell. Like, you got to go through all the different levels of life and be sent to hell. You have to do something really bad to not just reincarnate as somebody who's worse off or reincarnate as an animal or insect. That's just my bias. I'm Hindu, so that's my bias. That's what I believe. I'm qualifying it. If you're practicing magic, you're going to be in a certain segment of society that seems weird, isn't really accepted, especially if you don't have any magical practitioners around you, or if you're not in contact with magical practitioners, then it's going to be very difficult for you to feel like you're a part of a community, or feel like you're legitimized as a person. And this is what happens to a lot of magicians, is that they reach this point of isolation because they practice these things, and then they just dive headfirst into depression, just because they fall, because a lot of the time our strength wavers, and we fall into depression because we feel so isolated. This is really advice for everybody. No matter what you believe, no matter what you do, no matter what you practice, reach out to other people like you. We have the internet now. It's wonderful. You reach out to people that think like you on the internet, whether it be through Facebook groups, whether it be through YouTube, whether it be through email, just finding different communities that you click with, no matter how far away they are. Find the support you need based on finding people that are like you. Don't conform to a group. Find a group that is like who you truly are, and then connect with that group. This is a great thing about the internet. And if you're watching this, you have access to the internet. Also, never doubt yourself because of what somebody else says. The only reason you should doubt yourself is if your conscience starts to get to you, and you start thinking, why did I do that? Was that wrong? And if you really feel like what you did was wrong, then maybe you can feel bad, but then you can correct it by doing something better. But do not feel bad just because somebody places a label on you that you're going to hell, you're a magical practitioner, you're practicing evil. If somebody's making you feel bad by saying things like that, then just cut them off from your life if you can, but also recognize that they're ignorant and they're wrong. Do not be afraid of yourself. Do not conform out of pressure. And it may be difficult, but the first step is really liking and loving yourself and realizing what you believe and who you truly are, which is very hard. Most people go their entire lives without realizing who they are. So this is a big demand, but it's one that we have to realize if we're on a magical path, because if we don't realize that, then we'll be in pain for the rest of our lives. So it's a very it's a very important and immediate demand that we need to place upon ourselves to figure out who we are and what we believe if we're in an isolated group. Then once we realize it, it's easy. There's no choice anymore. Well, I mean, there's still choice. You can change at any point in your life, but there's no doubting anymore. And that's what you need, the point you need to get to. At any rate, I kind of want to make this a little bit shorter than my usual videos. I tried to make it shorter anyway. I see we're at like 15 minutes and 40 seconds right now. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you feel like you need to reach out, you feel like you need some advice, shoot down in the comment section below on YouTube. I greatly appreciate all comments, and I try to respond to every comment. If you want to contact me on Facebook for more in-depth conversation and advice on something like this, which I give for free, go to www.facebook.com/hunter.salazar. And if you contact me on Facebook, friend me, message me, then I will try to help you to the best of my ability. And at any rate, thank you very much for watching, and I hope all of you find yourselves and find peace.